Hi, my name is Ruth Mengistu, and today I'd like to discuss the communicative functions of laughter and aphasia,
which is any speech or language disorder due to brain damage.
There are many different types of laughter, unique to each person, but aside from making our sides hurt and our eyes crinkle, as well as being just plain good for the soul, are there any implications for laughter in terms of our communication? Melissa Norris and Sakina Drummond attempt to investigate just that in their research as they compare the communicative functions of aphasic and non-aphasic adults using 4 linguistic contexts. But before we delve any deeper, let's rewind a little bit. Now, what exactly is laughter? According to Kostler, laughter is a reflex produced by the movement of 15 facial muscles in a pattern, followed by altered breathing. The central nervous system acts as the initiator of this laughter reflex, while the peripheral nervous system has been found responsible for the final execution of laughter, specifically during the changes in the respiratory patterns. These changes are brought about by a forceful expiration to propel a laughter response, followed by a forceful inspiration. Dimberg's analysis of facial muscle responses from subjects exposed to photos of happy or angry facial expressions yielded results that indicated that external stimuli can elicit different facial expressions important for communication. But just how did laughter survive natural selection? According to Izard, humans inherited facial expressions like laughing and smiling from lower primates. Collier adds a second factor to this evolutionary theory through his indication that expressive behavior was passed down from generation to generation because individuals who possess them are more likely to survive and pass their characteristics on to their offspring. But aside from spurring on the survival of the human race, the main function of laughter is nonverbal communication, which forms a large part of social interaction. The role of smiling and laughing as communicative functions plays out across the lifespan. In children, nonverbal behaviors develop before verbal communication. As verbal communication is acquired, nonverbal communication is further refined. What is important to note is that these acquisitions are perceived as modulations to communication and not as intrinsic aspects of it, because smiling and laughing are prerequisites for successful communication. For adults, on the other hand, their nonverbal communication has been refined over a longer period of time, thus allowing for more control over unconscious smiling and laughter at the benefit of the speaker. The first indication of the pragmatic function of laughter was in Provine's study of college freshmen. He found that laughter and humor do not necessarily go together, as the listeners often started laughing before the humorous utterance had occurred, which may indicate that the listener wants the speaker to continue, much like leaning into the speaker or nodding in agreement encourages them that the listener is paying attention. Provine noted that this premature laughter response occurred across the board, regardless of the subject's age, race, sex, social status, or accent.
To date, which is if we were still living in the year 98 when this research was first published, there is no information regarding the communicative or pragmatic function of laughter in the aphasic population, though we are aware that adults with aphasia have limited or impaired verbal communication. The research of Norris and Drummond attempts to learn how laughter used in the aphasic population affects communication. This is an important question for those of us who are striving to increase the communication of aphagics, especially the implications that it may have for developing future treatment strategies.
10 males were selected as subjects for this study, 5 with acquired aphasia and 5 without aphasia. Each of the adults with aphasia had suffered left hemisphere lesions and were assigned to the experimental group. The 5 non-brain damaged adults were selected as the control group to match their aphasic counterparts for variables such as race, sex, and chronological age. None of these individuals reported suffering from any neurological disease or speech and language problems. The subjects were exposed to 4 different tasks: reading 2 comic strips from Calvin and Hobbes, answering basic open-ended questions about themselves in a conversation format, For example, tell me something about your family, or what kinds of activities do you do every day? They were also asked a series of open-ended questions regarding the subject's favorite hobbies, like, what do you like to do for fun? Lastly, 3 jokes were selected from Reader's Digest that were perceived to be neutral against any bias of variables of race, gender, and ethnicity. Each subject was instructed to first listen to the presented joke and then repeat it back to the examiner. A joke presented is as follows.
I mean, is this stuff bad or what?
Oh, that's not nice. Those chefs work really hard.
And what's with those Starbucks, huh? They're everywhere.
A lot of people want coffee. It's supply and demand. It's the foundation of our entire economy, Paul.
And who do I talk to about those long lines at the ATM? That's what I want to know.
Not me, Mr. Reiser. Someone who has time to fritter away, but not me.
A man and a woman went out to a fancy restaurant on a date, and they each had lobster, wine, and a large dessert. As they had their dessert after the meal, the man said, "If my doctor saw me, he would be rather upset." And the woman asked, "Why? Does he have you on some sort of diet?" And the man replied, "No, I still owe him money." Intra and intercoder reliability was obtained between the 2 investigators. Laughter occurrence was identified by verbalization or vocalization combined with some sort of facial movement, such as eyebrow elevation or mouth opening. All of the incidents of laughter were examined for each of the following parameters. Communication mode, where the laughter incident was assigned to either a speaking or a listening mode. Communicative functions, where the laughter was assigned to one of 10 speech acts that ranged from answering to labeling to predicting. At this stage, the laughter also was assigned to one of 4 discourse strategies: initiation, termination, maintenance, and conversational repair. Next was the time duration of laughter, followed by the verbal behavior accompanying that laughter. These behaviors could be categorized as either a phrase, which is the production of 2 or more words while laughing, a descriptive word, which is the production of a single meaningful word when laughing, and a filler word, which is the production of a vocalization that doesn't have any true meaning. And finally, each incident of laughter was coded under its respective task. The independent variables were subject groups and experimental tasks, while the dependent variables were laughter occurrence and communicative functions. Figure 1 illustrates the average of laughter occurrences for the speech act categories. Rather, the 7 categories where the aphasia group relatively laughed more. The remaining 3 speech categories of protest, reject, label, and predict were exhibited by the aphasic group, but not by the non-aphasic group. Here, Table 5 revealed a significant difference between the 2 groups for their use of descriptive words. The aphasic group used descriptive words significantly more often during laughter than the non-aphasic group. What is interesting to note is that the aphasic subjects produced filler words more often, followed by phrases, while descriptive words were produced least often. This is in contrast to the non-aphasic group who produced phrases the most, followed by filler words, while descriptives were not used by them at all. There was a significant main effect for the 4 tasks, which led to follow-up statistics that revealed a significant difference between both the joke and comic strip tasks and the joke and hobby tasks. The aphasic subjects yet again produced a relatively greater number of laughter occurrences during all 4 contexts. That there was no significant difference between aphasic and non-aphasic subjects for the total amount of laughs. The aphasic group revealed a greater number of laughter occurrences than the non-aphasic group, totaling 121 to 87 laughs, respectively.
The results of this investigation revealed time and time again that laughter occurs more often in aphasics than non-aphasics. Which yields the question, does laughter influence communication? To answer that, we must look at the wider distribution of laughter across the different speech acts and discourse strategies in aphasic communication. In terms of speech acts, for instance, aphasic adults use laughter significantly more often than the non-aphasic adults when protesting or rejecting. Norris and Drummond presumed that a possible explanation for this finding may be related to the tendency for aphasic adults to protest a response to their statement, perhaps as a result of being misinterpreted more often. This assumption lends itself to the thought that laughter is a socially accepted format used to communicate to the conversational partner that he or she has misunderstood what they were trying to say. Additionally, The results on discourse strategies further indicate the importance for laughter in aphasic communication. Aphasic adults laugh significantly more often when initiating verbal output, implying that they utilize laughter whenever they want to assume the role of a speaker during the discourse. But both aphasic and non-aphasics use laughter to maintain a discussion, which seems to agree with previous notions that laughter is used by all adults as a maintenance strategy regardless of their verbal skills. Additionally, the results on discourse strategies further indicate the importance for laughter in aphasic communication. Aphasic adults laugh significantly more often when initiating verbal output, implying they utilize laughter whenever they want to assume the role of a speaker during the discourse. But both aphasics and non-aphasics use laughter to maintain a discussion, which seems to agree with previous notions that laughter is used by all adults as a maintenance strategy, regardless of verbal skill. During the joke experimental task, both groups laughed significantly more often when utilizing the repeat speech category, which occurred most often during the retelling of a joke. Non-aphasic adults had an easier time repeating a joke due to their linguistic proficiency, while on the other hand, aphasic adults had obvious problems repeating a joke because of their limited verbal communication. In general, both groups produced laughter significantly more often during the joke situation. On a similar note, one interesting observation is that during the listening or telling of a joke, both groups maintained eye contact, which isn't a surprise when compared to the comic strip reading. Finally, laughter occurred more frequently for all adults when they assumed the role of a speaker rather than as a listener.
In conclusion, each of these observations suggests that laughter is an important and positive feature of aphasic communication. Norris and Drummond proposed that perhaps it is a learned automatic response to compensate for their impaired verbal communication. Furthermore, there are clinical implications for these findings in terms of assessment and management of their communication. For example, receptive language performance, which is our ability to listen and understand language, can be assessed through the appropriate use of a laughter response.
Future research could verify these implications as well as examine the use of laughter with other clinical populations, such as those with right hemisphere damage and patients with non-neurological medical diagnoses.